All right, let's dive in. We're going to talk about something of a silent killer. It's a single-celled parasite called Trypanosoma cruzi, and it is the culprit behind a really complex and frankly often overlooked illness, Chagas disease. In this session, we're going to break down exactly how this tiny organism thrives and the enormous challenge it poses to global health. Now, to really get a handle on Chagas, we need to look at it from all angles. We'll start by, meeting the parasite itself, then we'll follow its incredibly intricate life cycle. From there, we'll get into the different phases of the disease, the big difficulties in diagnosis and treatment, and finally, we'll cover the absolutely crucial strategies for prevention and control. So, first up, let's get acquainted with the organism at the very center of this story, Trypanosoma cruzi. Now, this parasite's home turf is primarily South and Central America. It's the cause of Chagas, which is a classic zoonotic disease. And what that means, of course, is that it can be transmitted from animals to humans. Okay, so once this parasite gets inside a human host, it basically becomes a master of disguise. It switches between two very distinct forms, and the strategy is key because it dictates where it lives in the body and what it does. One form actually burrows deep inside our tissues to hide and multiply, while the other form takes to the bloodstream to travel around and spread. And here they are, the two forms. First, you've got the amastigote. Think of this as the factory stage. It's an oval-shaped form that invades our muscle and nerve cells, and its job is just to replicate, safely hidden away from the immune system. Now, once it's produced in huge numbers, it transforms into the trypomastigote. This is the traveler, a mobile, kind of C-shaped form that bursts into the bloodstream. It doesn't multiply, but its crucial job is to spread the infection all throughout the body and, of course, be available for the next insect that comes along. So, you might be wondering, how do scientists actually tell these apart from our own cells under a microscope? Well, the key identifier for both of these forms is a really unique structure called the kinetoplast. It's this dense, distinct network of mitochondrial DNA. When you see this, it is a definitive marker that you're looking at this specific class of protozoa, which, of course, includes Trypanosoma cruzi. Okay, so now that we know the different forms, let's follow the journey. You see, T. cruzi's survival depends on this remarkable and very complex life cycle that has to bridge two completely different worlds, the body of a vertebrate host, like us, and the body of an invertebrate insect. The whole process is really fascinating. It all kicks off when an infected reduviid bug, you might have heard it called a kissing bug, bites a person. But here's the key part. It defecates near the wound. The infective trypastigotes from the feces then get into the host's body. Once they're inside, they very quickly invade cells and transform into that amastigote form to start multiplying. After they've replicated, they morph back into trypastigotes, burst out of the cell, and spill right into the bloodstream, now ready to infect the next bug that comes looking for a blood meal. But, and this is an absolutely critical point, humans aren't the only vertebrate hosts. The parasite thrives in all sorts of animal populations, armadillos, dogs, even domestic cats. They all act as natural reservoirs. And this is what makes eradication so incredibly difficult. The parasite can just maintain itself out in the wild, completely independent of any human infection cycle. And listen, it's not just about the bug bite. Transmission can also happen through things like contaminated blood transfusions, organ transplants, and, tragically, from an infected mother to her child during pregnancy. These non-vectorial routes are so important for understanding how Chagas disease is spreading far beyond its traditional endemic regions. All right, now that we've got a handle on the parasite's life cycle, let's look at what this actually does to people, the clinical consequences. Chagas disease typically unfolds in two really distinct phases, an acute initial infection followed by a long and often totally silent chronic phase. And it happens pretty fast. After that initial bite, there's a relatively short incubation period, usually just about 1 to 2 weeks before the very first signs of the disease start to show up. And here, you can really see the two phases of Chagas. The acute phase, which we often see in young children, starts quickly. You get fever, visible signs. It can be quite severe, sometimes causing myocarditis. That's a dangerous inflammation of the heart muscle. Now, if the patient survives this initial stage, the disease enters a chronic phase. And this is the silent part. It can last for decades with absolutely no symptoms before suddenly reappearing as severe, life-threatening damage like cardiac myopathy or a massively enlarged colon, which we call megacolon. One of the classic textbook signs of acute Chagas disease is something called Romana's sign. It's this very distinctive, one-sided swelling around the eye,
and it happens when the parasite's point of entry is the conjunctiva of that eye. It's a key diagnostic clue for any clinician working in endemic areas.
So, as you can imagine, all of this leads to some immense challenges in both diagnosing and treating this disease. The parasite is, in so many ways, a hidden enemy, especially during that long, silent chronic phase. There's a whole toolkit for diagnosis, but the right tool really depends on the phase of the disease. During the acute phase, when there are lots of parasites floating around in the blood, a simple microscopic look at a blood smear might just be enough. But in the chronic phase, well, the parasite's hiding in tissues, so the numbers in the blood are way too low. That's when we have to rely on more indirect or sensitive methods, like serology to find the antibodies your body has made, or even molecular tools like PCR to detect the parasite's DNA. Which brings us to the big question, the one that's on everyone's mind, for patients and public health officials alike. Do we actually have an effective treatment for Chagas disease? The answer, unfortunately, is not a simple yes. We have two main drugs, but their success is limited. And here's the crucial reason why. They're pretty effective at killing the trypomastigotes, the ones traveling in the bloodstream, but they can't get inside the host's own cells to kill the amastigote form, those hidden replication factories we talked about. And this means we can't fully eliminate the source of the infection. So if treatment is that tricky, what do we do? Well, given these really significant limitations, the public health strategy has to pivot. The primary line of defense against Chagas disease isn't a cure, it's prevention and rigorous control of that insect vector. And this strategy is built on three really practical pillars. First, widespread vector control, so using insecticides to knock down the bug populations. Second is personal protection, things like repellents and bed nets. And third, and this is a critical long-term solution, is improving housing conditions, eliminating the cracks and crevices in walls and roofs where these bugs love to live and breed. To put it simply, our best weapon against Chagas isn't a pill, it's a shield. The strategy has to be proactive. We have to focus on interrupting that transmission cycle itself, basically stopping the parasite's journey before it ever even begins in a new person. And this leaves us with a final and pretty sobering question to think about. In our age of global travel and migration, what are the implications of a disease that can lie dormant for decades? Right? As people move from endemic regions, these undetected chronic infections are moving with them. And this poses a silent but massive challenge to blood banks, to transplant services, and to unprepared health systems all over the world. It is a global health problem that is quietly growing, and it's one we can no longer afford to ignore.